are watching Channel Africa Conversations.
When colonization was upon us, colonizers did not find us without technologies or without any sense of identity. There is enough evidence and enough proof that Africans were scientists, were mathematicians, were able to sustain themselves using their own ways, using their own knowledge systems.
Hello and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm Peter Ndoro. The 12th International African Writers' Day lecture took place recently at the Africa Century International Writers' Conference in Pretoria in South Africa. November the 7th was designated as International African Writers' Day by the Conference of African Ministers of Education and Culture, and this was done in Cotonou in Benin in 1991. This year marked the 33rd year of this crucial day, when Africans commemorate African writers' contributions to the continent's growth. This year, the conference turns its attention to artificial intelligence and its impact on literature, social justice and social change, and also what the future portends in the creative and cultural space. And one of the speakers was Indigenous Knowledge Systems expert, author and multi-award-winning academic Dr. Thulisile Bhuda, who spoke about the recognition of Indigenous language as well as Indigenous knowledge systems in higher education. I spoke to her on Channel Africa Conversations. Dr. Thulisile Bhuda, thank you so much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Perhaps we can start by getting a sense of what inspired you to start studying and doing this work that you do, and looking at Indigenous languages and Indigenous knowledge systems.
My journey, Peter, began in 2013 when the Northwest University South Africa decided to have a degree called Bachelor of Indigenous Knowledge Systems, and I was one of their intakes, 20 intakes for 2013. It was the first of its kind and the first university in the entire continent to produce such a degree. So this degree was speaking to my culture and heritage, and I knew it is where I belonged. So I enrolled for the Indigenous Knowledge Systems, also known as the IKS. And during my journey as a student, I felt like this was a calling and it was an urgent matter for me to enroll also for my postgraduate studies. And later, I decided that, of course, I want to also embark on the language aspect, because we cannot speak about our Indigenous knowledge systems without speaking about our languages.
So why do you think it's important to integrate Indigenous knowledge systems and Indigenous languages in higher education?
Well, first of all, Indigenous knowledge systems is ways of knowing, ways of being, and ways of living of Indigenous people. And here, when we look at Africa, of African people. So who we are matters in higher education, where we come from, our religion, our values, our roots matter in higher education, because for a very long time, higher education has promoted Western systems. And we have studied using, of course, Western systems ourselves. So the time to decolonize has come. And when we decolonize, most people will think maybe we are speaking of only languages. But no, we are also speaking of Indigenous knowledge systems. We are saying our languages should be used as a medium of instruction in higher education, but also our Indigenous knowledge systems, our ways of knowing and being should also be part of the curriculum. We are saying that when colonization was upon us, colonizers did not find us without technologies or without any sense of identity. There is enough evidence and enough proof that Africans were scientists, were mathematicians, were able to sustain themselves using their own ways, using their own knowledge systems that they have tried through trial and error. So technology or civilization has never came and did not come with colonizers. But unfortunately, Peter, this knowledge was not written by our people, and therefore, hence why now Indigenous scholars exist. Indigenous scholars like myself exist to tell the stories of Indigenous people, because we represent Indigenous people in higher education.
What are some of the challenges that Indigenous languages and Indigenous knowledge systems face in getting recognition and getting integrated into higher education?
Definitely, stigma is the first thing. It's the first challenge, and people do not believe that who we are matters in higher education. But then again, Peter, I've indicated this is because of colonization, where you colonize people's minds, where you make them hate who they are and where they come from. But at the same time, Africa is a young continent in terms of democracy or in terms of independence, and therefore we are relearning. And while we relearn, we are also cautious that we are not going to do away with Western systems. Rather, we are going to integrate who we are to in higher education and also in basic education. But most importantly, Peter, people will ask you, where will Indigenous knowledge systems or where will African languages take me if I were to embrace myself ngesindebele? So people are afraid and thinking that their languages will not take them anywhere, forgetting that without the usage of language and culture, they will erode, they will face erosion because they are tacit. So they will face, disappearance. And hence why we have statistics essay once in a while that checks how many languages are spoken. And we do have other statistics analysis where we check how many language cultures are also disappearing. So if people do not practice and if people do not speak and if people are not proud of themselves to see how they learn or what they learn at home can be integrated in education, then our cultures and languages are in trouble. And people also ask Peter, for instance, like I said, people will ask, where will Indigenous knowledge systems take me, or where will language take me? For instance, when tourists come to visit Africa, or let's make an example with South Africa, the first thing they want to do is to see the raw culture, the intangible and the tangible heritage. The first thing they want to do is to see traditional dancers. They will want to see traditional houses. They will want to see Kruger National Park, and they will want to see people who interact with animals, performers. And those are indigenous people. That is our indigenous knowledge. Communities are able to also benefit economically using this indigenous knowledge. They're able to sustain their livelihoods and they're able to contribute to the tourism sector while they also contribute to the arts and culture and the Department of Science and Innovation. Because not only are we looking at tangible and intangible or performance arts, or we are also looking at traditional medicine and how it can be used to cure illnesses and disease. Look at COVID-19. A lot of people were running back to their roots and culture and planting their own medicine and remembering what our ancestors used to tell us about traditional medicine. And that tells us that it was a wake-up call that indigenous knowledge systems indeed has value in the 21st century.
Do you think that our languages, are sufficiently developed enough? In other words, is there enough vocabulary, perhaps, to study things like medicine, engineering? Or is it that we have to purposefully find words to, I don't want to use the word catch up, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
I do, Peter. And hence why in the linguistic discipline, there are different types of linguists that deal with terminologies and others, so many different linguists that ensure that our languages, keep up with new terminologies that are introduced. But I want to tell you, Peter, that if right now you were to plant a seed outside using Shona, the seed is going to grow. It doesn't, it will not grow in the school. It will not grow because of English. The seed will grow anyway because, it's not determined by language. But if right now we speak of writing and documenting, I would tell you that South Africa has enough linguists that, are working on translation and also on developing new terminology. However, even though I could say they're enough in other languages such as isiZulu, we see the development of isiZulu, but there are other languages that are lacking behind, and the stigmatization, Peter, still comes to place that I would rather be an engineer than a linguist. What will linguistics do for me? Or rather, maybe, I don't know what the cases are, and I know that PenSalp is working tirelessly to make sure that indigenous languages are protected and that so many students are enrolled in linguistics. But it's very difficult, Peter, in academic spaces. I speak for the Ndebele people, and I know about 10, if not 15 Ndebeles in higher education and teaching Isindebele, and that's a very, very low number. And it shows you that there is stigma, there is fear around that, and people do not know what their future will hold if they study linguistics. So they would rather take, their chances with engineering and other prominent courses in order to be on the safe space.
You mentioned the Northwest University, and I suppose this is an example of what can be done. What do universities and tertiary institutions need to do to get on this path and get this right and make sure that Indigenous knowledge systems and languages are not marginalized? How do we reverse the trend?
Well, Peter, let me take you back to history. In 1996, underprivileged universities, especially those in rural areas, were identified in South Africa that they should be the ones to integrate Indigenous knowledge systems. That was in 1996. And in 1998, there was a national workshop that was held at the Northwest University Mahikeng campus, where the Northwest University actually took its first step to say, we are the university to integrate Indigenous knowledge systems in our curriculum. We will develop the IKS curriculum. Of course, we have other universities that pledged the same to do the same work, such as the University of Venda and the University of Limpopo. And thus far, of course, the Northwest University is the first of its kind, but we also have to acknowledge the University of Venda for also integrating IKS and is still developing, the curriculum. But the Northwest University has a complete curriculum that should be integrated in all other universities, in all 26, not only the previously underprivileged universities, but also all 26 universities, so that all universities will adhere to the national and international structures, so that a student from the Northwest University can go study at the University of Venda or the University of Limpopo and be able to be accredited modules and be able to, to compete in the global world. Because if we look at Indigenous studies, Peter, they are popular in New Zealand, popular in Canada, well developed in America, for instance, where we look at Black studies, and also you see, I'm forgetting the other one. It's New Zealand, it's Canada, it's America, and Australia. Yes, and Australia. So if our students were to do any student exchange, making an example, they should be able to be well absorbed in those countries which have developed Indigenous studies. So we need a curriculum, Peter, that is aligned to each other. Nobody should work in silos. And hence why the Department of Science and Innovation, together with the NRF and the Center of Excellence in Indigenous Knowledge Systems from KwaZulu-Natal, is institutionalizing IKS and visiting universities where IKS and introducing the IKS framework and curriculum, so that universities will adopt the same curriculum, and no university should work in silos. And I think that is a great initiative, because that is their agenda until 2029. And I think it's a wonderful initiative. Of course, it's supported by the Department of Higher Education and the previous minister, Naledi Pandor, who was even advocating for grant to be funded by NRF, NRF to fund IKS grants, IKS projects. And hence why all over the country today, we have the IKS Documentation Center. One, for instance, each and every province, 9 provinces have IKS documentation centers, which are absorbed in universities. So we are confident, Peter, that the IKS program will be well implemented. And we acknowledge universities like the University of Venda and the University of Limpopo, just to count a few, who are embarking on this journey of introducing the BIKS curriculum.
It sounds, though, that the way it's set up, it's almost as if it's seen as another subject, not a system that's used in a university. And maybe that's the big jump that's required. I wonder if one of our biggest challenges, when I look at the continent in general, is that we have thousands of languages. And maybe it is our legacy now, which is negative for some of us when we look at it. But these colonial languages have helped millions of people to communicate across borders. Even within our own countries, we have thousands of languages. How do we embrace our cultures, but able to spread across the continent if we're faced with this challenge of having so many languages, even within our borders?
You know, Peter, what I like and the indie Kulu is to learn from other people and how they're doing it. If we can look at the Afrikaner group and see how they're advocating for their language and how they're investing economically and via education, it's a room for learning. If we can look at isiZulu as an indigenous language that is also taught in other countries, for instance, in America, it's you know, it's a room to learn on how other languages and how other people are doing it. Which structures are they using? And I need you to understand, Peter, that everything and who we are, is man-made. These structures are man-made, but it's up to the people, to advocate for such. If we don't have enough people in academic spaces or in positions to influence policy, and then we are failing our own communities that entrust us to continue preserving their languages, to entrust us to continue to preserve their indigenous knowledge systems. So I would say to you, I agree with you because I'm speaking to you in English, and I agree with you that, foreign languages, but what did it take, Peter? It took sacrifice. It took sacrificing people. It took, tormenting people if it had to be at some point for people to lose who they are and adopt new knowledge systems. And if we were to have sacrifices, of course, that do not torment people, but if we have structures in place to teach our people on how to go back to who they are, I truly believe, Peter, that it can be successful. We just need structures and a committed community to see this through. That's what I believe.
Do you think it might be useful, and I'm thinking as a Pan-African here, and not just as a South African or a Southern African, if we pick a language like Swahili, maybe that's spoken by the most number of people on the continent, what if we start there and say, everyone across the continent, let's pick up Swahili and then start building from that? Might that be a solution?
Well, it can be difficult, even though it might be a solution because of tribalism. Remember, Peter, as much as we want to fight colonizers or foreign language to Africa, we're also fighting amongst ourselves because we always want to see who's better than who. You are Zimbabwean, you are inferior. You are closer, don't tell. So we have this self-hate than collaboration, and that is how colonizers even manage to conquer our people. Because if you promote division and you promote hate, and people will hate each other. So with Swahili being compulsory, or with Swahili being a language across Southern Africa, to make an example, it's to me, as an academic, as someone who does this work on a daily basis, it's not a problem. It's not a challenge. But to someone who is from another language that is facing extinction, it's a challenge. So they also want their languages to matter. And if we can make research even now, Peter, and let's be frank, in South Africa, we have more than 11 languages. Or let me not, actually, because we have 12 now, let me exclude Afrikaans, English, and sign language. And we have about 9 indigenous languages that are recognized. We have more than that. We have people who are Amampondo, Amahlubi. In Limpopo, we have people, ethnic groups, and I cannot say subgroups or dialects. We cannot say people's languages are dialects. Subgroups which are not recognized, which people now are bounded to be absorbed by other subgroups. It's like a wafa wafa situation, survival of the fittest kind of a situation. So we are not addressing that. And if we are not, we cannot bring the subject of Swahili to the table. Because if someone feels that they have been marginalized already by democracy or by government, making an instance, if their languages are not well documented for the future generation, why would you want to introduce something that will destroy the languages completely? And hence why I'm saying that we need structures. And hence why I'm saying that to an indigenous person in a community, he will not understand or she will not understand what you and I are talking about. But you and I can agree here that Swahili can be the best solution. But for someone who's been in the, marginalized area or marginalized language, it's to him or her, it's more marginalization and more like an apartheid system towards his language. So we need structures, we need frameworks, we need panels and advisors and councils to go to these indigenous communities to work tirelessly in developing and protecting these languages, so that even when we develop or we bring Swahili or any other indigenous language to be compulsory and to be promoted, we already have documented our own languages and they're safe for future generational usage.
How do you think AI can be used in furthering indigenous languages and knowledge systems?
Well, I think mostly digitalization. If you digitalize indigenous languages, indigenous knowledge systems, preserving for the next generation. There are so many, actually, there is little work done on artificial intelligence, but there is more work done on documentation and libraries. And hence why I recommend that, or I argue that to digitalize languages and indigenous knowledge systems is a way to go. Some other people have started the work. It's a new field that all of us should explore. It's very exciting, especially if it has committed scholars who are willing to embark on this journey. So the conference was actually eye-opening because people came from different backgrounds on how that can be implemented. And my standpoint is that if we digitalize our knowledge systems and our indigenous languages, and if that will enable us to store them also for the future generation. I mean, a video that is on digital media right now will still be relevant in the next 100 years. So that one is one of my suggestions.
So one of the challenges with artificial intelligence is it's as good as what it's fed. And I'm busy studying a language now on one of these apps. And I keep getting reminded to be careful because sometimes these translations are not great. They're good mostly. And so what do you see as some of the challenges of bringing in artificial intelligence into a space like this, especially where it's not always curated by exactly the right people? And we know that generationally, you have the Zulu that's spoken in town and the Zulu that's spoken in the rural areas. Artificial intelligence, what does it do to sort that out?
Well, in every process, there is always the negative, effects of it. In every, initiative, you'll always find challenges. Like you're saying, you can find digital platforms that are actually falsifying information, and hence why such challenges exist, and hence why proper platforms, you'll always find a duplicate that is not the right one, but proper platforms have to be established. If, for instance, these apps are owned by, I'm making an example, PenSouth, because PenSouth is a wing of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. So if there is an app that is of PenSouth, and this app is also, recommended to basic education, making an example, and to higher education, then it means they can hire experts in linguistics to be able to do this work. And, background check, academic background check, and also for them to guarantee that these are the right people, of course, to do this work. But as I'm saying, there can always be someone on the side that wants to make extra cash and has a cheaper app for you to learn isiZulu, and you'll find that that is not the correct isiZulu or isiNdebele, to be specific. But another thing, Peter, is that people migrate, people find other people, they live in similar spaces, and language gets diluted like that, and hence why, like I'm saying, that if we have proper structures, if we were to have apps that are nationally controlled, for instance, by government, people can always be held accountable, and of course, background check and academic background, and criminal offense if people start doing what is not of the benefit of the masses. So most importantly, we must hold each other accountable for the dying of indigenous languages and indigenous knowledge systems, because it's our own doing as Abantu Abamnyama. We as African people are responsible for this, and it is us to fix this. Of course, there is colonization, but after colonization, what did we do? So now it is time to see our wrongdoings and to fix, because the blaming game has to expire. Even though we do blame, but what happens after? Who we are after apartheid or after colonization matters. And we cannot always look back and say, you did this to us, but what happens after? And now it's our responsibility as African people to protect, preserve, and disseminate our knowledge and our indigenous languages.
When I look at society today and the influences that we are under the influence of, I just wonder if this work has a broader implication on society, social justice, crime even, that kind of thing. Do you think it might influence the way we live as societies if indigenous knowledge systems and language is promoted and becomes mainstream?
Yes, I think so. Peter, I want to share you this story of how if a child is in a foundation phase and a child is failing to grasp certain knowledge because it is translated or it is taught in English, and the content is foreign to this child. This child might be deemed as dumb or unable to grasp information or illiterate. There are so many words people use to actually say that the disadvantaged children in trying to grasp the information are not capable. So what I'm indicating to you right now is that the same child is able actually to do Ndebele paintings, which shows geometric symmetrical mathematics, symmetric geometry. The same child is able to be a shepherd. A shepherd knows if all his father's cattle are there, and if one is missing, the shepherd will know, but the father has 100 cattle. So the shepherd understands mathematics because he lives because of that. Mathematics is on everyday practice. He knows the cows. If one is missing out of 100, he will know. But the same person fails mathematics because mathematics is not practical. 1 + 1 is 2. How did we get to 2? We do not know. But if I take my father's cow and another cow, I know that this is how we got to 2. So they fail to grasp the content because it doesn't relate to their cultural background, and the language that is used at school is not the correct one. And where does that lead them? It leads them to dropping out. Now, when they drop out, what do? They commit crime. To our grandmothers in the morning, they're going to bus stations, and these are the same people who take their belongings and who violate them. So they become problematic to the community because we have failed to see their talents. We have failed them also as educators, as instructors. So if we were to say indigenous knowledge systems can change and transform society, we are saying that the knowledge of the community can work in their benefit. The knowledge the community has, whether it's of medicinal plants, whether it's of painting like the Ndebele women, whether it's of beadwork like the Ndebeles, there have to be intellectual property rights to protect the Ndebeles, and also so that they can also be the next Esther Mahlangu of tomorrow. So if a certain community has medicinal plant that can cure an illness, they can go and register with the DSI, NRF, the NICMAS, and the NICS office, which is the National Indigenous Knowledge Systems office, and the NRS National Recordal System, so that they are registered as practitioners, and they can benefit from this indigenous knowledge. Of course, this is supported by the IKS policy of 2004 that says that indigenous people must create wealth using their indigenous knowledge. But that is not promoted, Peter. All over the country, you'll never see a TV channel that advocates for indigenous knowledge systems and community development. It's not on educational programs. So if we don't promote that, and if people feel like they're useless, and hence why people today are consumers, they're waiting for jobs, not knowing that they can be job creators. Someone does not know that by doing this, tomorrow they can be another Esther Mahlangu, be renowned all over the world, and travel the entire continent or the entire world. What they think is that they're waiting for government to produce jobs for them. So they don't understand that who they are is actually currency. They are the money. They are the change that they've been asking for. So that is not understood. But where does it start? It starts with the curriculum. It starts with government structures. It starts also the root problems that there are no community initiatives where people are reminded and are trained on how they can utilize their indigenous knowledge and how they can properly protect it using the current existing systems. Because let's be honest, Peter, practitioners of indigenous knowledge, most of them are elders who've never attended any formal schooling. They do not know these structures. And most of the time when exploiters come to communities, making an example, to come and take resources, they target the traditional leaders, giving them pennies in order to exploit the land, in order to move people out of their land so that they can get resources and minerals. And the people of that land and the people that own the knowledge system do not benefit at all, because we are not well protected as indigenous people. And hence why indigenous studies exist, because not only are we protecting this knowledge through academic spaces, but we are influencing policy, and we are also representatives of indigenous people. So we are able to advocate for them at a government level and also in higher education level, while also writing papers and books to document this knowledge so that the future generation can have access and hope for the future, that indeed our own people have started this work. We will also continue protecting this work, just like the Maori people are doing. Have you seen in Parliament? They chant, they sing their songs, they're proud. You get shivers because they understand what they've been through, and they understand where they're going, and they embrace their knowledge systems proudly with the face marks and chantings and the face expressions. And if we fail, if we do not learn from the people of New Zealand, then we don't stand a chance as Africa to speak about indigenous knowledge systems in the next 20 years.
Dr. Thulisile Bhuda, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Fascinating conversation. Thank you so much indeed for illuminating this subject matter for us. And thank you for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks to all the viewers. Cheers.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Channel Africa Conversations. Thanks very much indeed for tuning in. Just before we go, though, please don't forget to engage with us on social media. The links are on your screen now. We look forward to hearing from you. What did you think about the conversation we had today? And also, we'd love to hear from you in terms of the conversations you'd like to hear. Who do you want us to talk to? What do you want us to talk about? Please drop us a comment in the comment section below. Until the next time, take care.